You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
To the chasers of light, to the purveyors of pictures, to all of you listening around the world, this is the F11 Photography Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Deal, along with your other host, Mr. Brandon Gorrie.
Yeah, we're doing, folks.
Yes, that was a very short... How's it going?
Yeah, it's good to be back in the studio. Feels nice. We've got our guest, Dauss, here. Good to have him. I'll let you introduce him, Kevin.
Yes, I'm going to introduce Dauss here in just a second, but first I'm going to talk about today's sponsor, Dehancer. Of those of you out there who shoot, if you shoot film and the film prices are making you cry, I totally understand. Film prices are very expensive. However, we have come a long way with technology, and we now have film emulations out there that are pretty awesome. And Dehancer is actually the first software I've seen out there that does a pretty good job of emulating the physical light hitting an emulsion. I find that a lot of times with film emulations, they'll try to nail the colors, they'll try to nail the grain. They don't really nail the physical part of it, which is a very organic part of shooting film. Dehancer, in my opinion, does a great job of that. Check out the link in the description below for 10% off, and you can use the code GORRIE, that's GORRIE, to get 10% off your copy of Dehancer today. But in studio, we have a special guest, and that would be Mr. Dauss Miller.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. Yes, so I'll tell a backstory here real quick. During the pandemic, when everything was on lockdown and everybody was seeking human interaction, Brandon was not seeking human interaction. He locked himself in like a hermit and was just like totally happy during lockdown. But the rest of us, we were seeking human interaction. And so Clubhouse came along, and that's where I first ran across Dauss.
Oh, that's right.
Dauss is not a common name, so I see DAUSS, and I'm like... Yeah, I'd keep seeing him in the rooms, and he'd have really insightful things to say. And there was a lot of BS on Clubhouse I saw going around, people trying to sell snake oil and all that. But Dauss kept it real, and all of his contributions, he stuck out to me. And I remember he had mentioned that he was moving from the Indiana area to Texas, to Austin. And so I kind of kept that in the back of my mind, and we kind of stayed in touch. We finally met face-to-face at WPPI in March. We're both at the Cheetah stand. Yeah, those guys are awesome, by the way.
Yeah, those guys are crazy awesome.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, look what they gave me. All right. And then they gave me the, right there, they gave me the parabolic.
Oh, nice.
So I'm checking that out. It is cool,
man. The parabolic?
Yeah, the 38 inch. Yeah, the QPB 38. I just did a review of that on my YouTube channel. It's a really cool parabolic reflector. So, but welcome to the show. Your portfolio is awesome, but as I start every interview off, I want to ask you, what got you into photography? How did you get to where you are today?
Whew, that's a loaded question. Photography was first introduced to me as a kid. I was probably, 5 or 6 years old. One of my older brothers was a photographer in high school, so there was just like studio equipment in my mom's house. We had a dark room in the basement, so it was just kind of around. My dad was not a photographer, but photography was a part of his business. So the cameras and just that stuff was just always around. So I just kind of had a camera with me at all times. So probably around high school is when I started to really like seriously dive into photography. Took a photography class, loved my instructor, and kind of dove deep into it. From there, I started my first business right after high school, and just kind of organically became a wedding photographer / portrait photographer, and then just kind of snowballed from there.
Now, you mentioned it was in a basement, so I'm going to assume this was in Indiana because they don't have those here in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, I lived in Indiana until about 1.5 years ago.
What part?
Carmel.
Carmel.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I just did a job for the Renaissance there for the hotel.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
So I used to live in Michigan, and I was not expecting cuisine to be. I was like, I'm in Indiana. Like I was like joking with my coworkers. I was like, we'll be lucky if we find a good restaurant here. I was completely wrong. Carmel has insane cuisine.
Yeah, Carmel. I mean, it's a great spot. One of the top cities in the country to live.
Yeah, and it just kind of like escaped me. I was like, oh, it's whatever. It's just this little suburb of Indianapolis. I didn't really pay much attention to it. And then when I got there, I was like, oh my gosh, no, this is actually a really cool town.
Yeah.
Like they have a cool little made up historic looking downtown, a new historic downtown there. Yeah. They had like this shop there they sell like wedding cakes and stuff, and it was all really white and bright, and there was lace. It was just a cool spot, man. Really, really beautiful city. So why did you leave?
Why did I leave? Another loaded question. Like I said, I'd been in Indiana my whole life, a photographer in Indiana my whole life, basically. And I just kind of reached a ceiling there ages ago, probably 10, 15 years ago. Was traveling a lot to work at the level that I wanted to work. And as my family grew and as, I kind of wanted to ground myself a little bit more, I wanted to work locally a lot more, and it just didn't have what I needed there. So began looking at other cities and places to go where I could work locally.
Now,
a little more often.
Now, you ended up in Austin, which I don't care what other cities you were considering. It was the total right choice because we're all Austinites here now. But no, really, though, what other cities were you considering checking out?
When it came to moving with my family, it wasn't like I was what drew me to Austin was community. And that first draw in was what first caused me to consider moving. So it's not like I was like, I want to move. Let me see what cities I want to go to. A friend of mine suggested I look into Austin, and I did. And then that's kind of what was like, oh yeah, I can probably move and find better opportunity in a different city.
Well, and you said you were finding yourself, despite the fact that you were living in Carmel, the majority of your work wasn't in Carmel. You're finding yourself having to travel. Mm-hmm. So, and that's actually a good point. If you're traveling anyway, you might as well move your home base somewhere where you're going to be more happy.
Right.
And it's kind of more centrally located. I mean, depending on if your work is in the Sun Belt or not. If you get a lot of work in the Sun Belt, Austin's a great centrally located place to be. Mm-hmm. Also, like you have the Silicon Valley people because there's so many Californians who moved here. There's always direct flights to San Jose, San Francisco, Los Angeles, all out of Austin Bergstrom. So definitely, and of course you can go. Any city's gonna have a direct flight to New York if you have something up there. So or Miami. So not bad. Well, we're glad you're here because you're physically in the studio. I mean, we've done some remote interviews, and they're cool, but there's something cool about having somebody in studio and being able to interact when you're in the same room. So,
for sure,
thank you for coming out. So you aren't just a portrait wedding photographer. You actually spin a lot of different plates, and this is something that is fascinating to me because I know a lot of photographers who take really great pictures, but they run really terrible businesses because they just think that, oh, well, I show up, I take really good pictures, and I run a great business, and that's it. That's all I got to do. And I'm like, no, that's why you're broke.
Yeah.
So talk about the importance of being a successful photographer and what you really have to do besides taking good pictures, because I would say that maybe 10% of it is being good at taking pictures, and then the other 90% is stuff that a lot of really good photographers don't realize they need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said a lot of things to respond to in there.
Yeah, sorry.
No, all good. I love that you said I spin a lot of plates. I love putting it that way. And I agree with that. One of the biggest things I think photographers forget to think about outside of taking great photos, and honestly, taking great photos is not that hard to do these days. There's a lot of great photographers, a lot of great artists, creatives that can take great photos. What is, I feel like, paramount outside of having a great product, which is the great photos, is delivering an experience to your client that is worth talking about. And that means, how you communicate. That means what their experience is when they're one-on-one with you, or whatever touch points you have. Like, it needs to be smooth and something that they don't experience all the time. It's got to be different. It's got to stand out from all the other bazillion photographers that they might encounter for whatever needs they have. So
I noticed that you're a Nikon shooter. Yeah. Kevin also informed me that you're a Phase 1 shooter, and I understand that if you're shooting Phase 1, you don't really have to ask that question. Why are you shooting Phase 1? But yeah. But I am curious from a gear perspective. What got you into Nikon, and what kept you with Nikon?
That's a good question. Especially like into the digital age of things. I can't say like as a diehard Nikon user that they've been on top of the game the whole time. So I mean, like I said before, my dad was a photographer, and my first film cameras were Nikon. And just as I got into business and all of that, it just made sense to stay with Nikon and use Nikon glass and all of that. But as things, I remember I went digital in 2001, and my first digital Nikon, I believe, was the D100, and stuck with that for a little while. And then, as other camera makers started to, release their digitals, I could feel, the technology lagging a little bit as other camera makers were kind of up in the game, and Nikon playing catch up a little bit. But I had all of my Nikon equipment. There's something about the Nikon system that just speaks to me. It just I've used all kinds of other cameras. I've used Canon and Fuji and all the other camera makers, but there's just something about the way the Nikon feels and how the buttons are, the ergonomics of it, just kind of, it's just made for me, I feel like.
Yeah, it's like grab and go, and when it comes down to it, you can almost just shoot with your right hand if you really needed to.
Yep.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Brandon and I are actually going to do a swap episode. So I shoot on Canon as my primary system, and he shoots as Nikon on his primary system. And so we're going to do something where we switch. So we're going to, one of the questions I'm going to ask you, and he's going to ask, I'm going to ask this to Vanessa Joy next week because she's going to be in here. But I'm going to be shooting on a Nikon camera here in a few weeks. So sell me on what I need to look out for.
What you need to look out for?
Yeah, what do I need to expect on a Nikon? Like ergonomics, what do I need to look out for on that?
I mean, it's comfortable. I think compared to I think the closest comparison is probably to Canon. So I like, just as a photographer, I'm a technical person, but I'm also just like an organic, abstract, creative person too. And I feel like
Brandon loves those types of people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the technical guy and he's the abstract. Yeah. So
cool.
You're kind of the balance of both.
Yeah.
of us.
I think I'm a 50-50 blend of both of those. And Canon, I feel like, expresses that the more creative, and the Nikon is leans in a little more to the technical. Mm-hmm. So I kind of get that from like the menu systems and how the buttons are and all of that, the ergonomics of it. It's a little more square and chunky, and Canon's a little more like curvy. And
can you flip the dials? Because I think Nikon, the front dial's the aperture and the back one's the shutter speed, right, by default?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, that's totally backwards of Canon like that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Fuji made they make an XS10 that's being discontinued, but I tried it out and it had the Nikon. setup. I was like, that's okay. I'll just change it. And they're like, nope. I was like, I can't change it. I'm like, no, if I can't get by my exposure triangle, I'm out. Like, I had to tap out on that camera. But yeah. So maybe when I borrow the camera from Brandon, maybe I'll flip the dials so I can actually get around on it, because I'll just like be changing the aperture on accident.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's one thing that's great about it is the functionality of the buttons and what they do. You can it's customizable, like almost 100%. So,
well, I will say first and foremost, and we talk about this on this show all the time, I hate fanboys. Like, I hate people who are like, I like Sony, Nikon, and Canon or shit. And it's like you get those people, and it's like, dude, like if you know how to find an exposure triangle on a camera and you understand how the autofocusing system works on a camera, if you can't take good pictures on it, you're the problem.
Yeah.
Not the camera.
Right.
And so to my point I'm trying to make is, even though I haven't touched I've touched Nikon, but I haven't actually shot on a Nikon since about the time that you switched to digital. I had a job in shooting like high school sports or something. It was my first job out of college and made me want to quit photography. But that was the last time I actually like went out and shot a professional job on a Nikon. So, but I will say, a lot of photographers I run across, I'll be like, oh, wow, their work is just beautiful. And then I go like they're a Nikon user. I'm like, okay. So like I take notes. The Z stuff is awesome. Like I can tell that the results are there. And so, I want to give praise to Nikon, even though I don't use it, just because I feel that we have too much fanboyism in this world. And people will think that like, oh, you can only be Canon or you can only be whatever. Nobody says that about Lumix, but unless they shoot video. It's my I had to throw in a barb at somebody. I thought that was the one I'd do. But no, I've just noticed that Nikon they make great stuff. I've heard some rumors that they might be having some financial issues, but I don't know anything about it. So, but I hope not, because that's the other thing is about fanboyism that pisses me off is people like, it's almost like they're rooting for the competitor to fail. And it's like, no, you don't understand. You want the competitor to succeed, because then it makes your camera brand go, oh man, they have a global shutter now. We need a global shutter. Like, we got to come out with a global shutter, or whatever. It's like, yeah, you want that competition.
Yeah, it keeps the innovation growing and happening.
Yeah, and I don't want Nikon to fail. I want Nikon to succeed. I don't want Canon to fail. I don't want Sony to fail. I want them all to succeed, because at the end of the day, we, the consumer, get to benefit.
You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
I noticed that a lot of your outdoor work that you do, you use off-camera flash. I know why you use off-camera flash, because it looks a hell of a lot better than trying to pull up shadows, But what are your favorite, like, first and foremost, what kind of flash do you typically use, strobe, whatever, and then what are your favorite types of modifiers you like to use when you do these really beautiful types of editorials? Because one thing I will give you a compliment on, and this is always, to me, the way I judge people in the off-camera flash is, how natural does it look? Mm-hmm. Does it look like this really beautiful natural scene that has this really artificial flash to it? Yeah, I find that the majority of your stuff, you can barely tell there's a flash there, and that's awesome.
Yeah,
by the way.
Thanks, man.
But what do you use? What's your process?
Like equipment wise?
Yeah.
I'm a pro photo guy. I love all things pro photo as much as I can. Just the versatility in and out of the studio. So on like location or in studio, they just have a line that works everywhere. Super consistent color and power wise, and I love that. Because shooting on location, typically working with models or people, when that moment happens, when that authentic expression happens, when that, everything is positioned just right, body pose and all the things, it's like this line of events that sparks in one single moment. If technically it doesn't happen because the flash doesn't fire or it's off power or something weird happens, it's like I can't work like that, So I like to know that I can count on my equipment to do exactly what I want it to do in the exact moment that I want it to do. And I know with my pro photo gear, I'm not going to have any concerns.
Do you have a particular type of modifier that you favor in a lot of those types of situations? You use softer light usually?
That's a great question. I feel like each creative like vision requires a different different modifier. I use bare bulb a lot of times. People are, oh, it's got to be soft light. Oh, it's got to be this or that. And it's like, light is light.
I take your side on this, and here's why. And I don't name names because our industry is very small, but there are people who their claim to fame in our industry is that they are like off-camera flash wizards, and that's all they do on like Instagram is just like, here's my off-camera flash tricks and whatever. But I've always noticed, like, and this bugs me, is I'll see these guys who are like, look at this beautiful off-camera flash, and it'll be like golden hour, and the sun will be like on the horizon, and they'll use that as like the backlight, and then they'll fill them with a softbox. I'm like, but the sun's harsh light. Like, why wouldn't you want to, like, first of all, I would probably just turn them around right into the sun, because I think that the sun is like one of the coolest forms of light you can use in that situation when it's low. You get, especially if you have like a male model, you want that really nice, prominent, masculine jawline. It's like, use the shadows to your advantage. But to your point about bare bulb, if you're in a situation where you're in a harsher lighting situation, maybe bare bulb's the way to go, because it actually is a similar light to what you're dealing with. It's more realistic to the scene. Right. And I find that sometimes it's a distraction when I see like a super soft light and then like there's all this other hard light around. Like, I get it in a studio. In a studio, you have carte blanche to do whatever you want. It's like, I'm creating, I'm doing, like, but when you're in like an environmental portrait, I find that sometimes the lighting can be a distraction if you're like using like a really like soft light to fill in somebody's face, and it's like in a situation where it just doesn't make sense, So anyway, I that's what I want to say is like, hey, I got your back on that. I'm glad you use bare bulb. I think that people are afraid of using hard light, but like hard light is one of the coolest things you can do if you want to sculpt shadows, if you want to over accentuate something like a jawline, like I was saying, or just like I just got done doing a session with a model for an agency right before we started this, where she wanted like her obliques to show up, and I was like, great, reflector, put that on there, just bare bulb, I turned it off the side, and her obliques were just popping, man. And it's like, yeah, but if I'd put a softbox on there, it wouldn't have been the same effect, you know?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is to understand what modifiers do and where they are most effective, and that's why I said, why I brought up bare bulb, because a lot of photographers that use off-camera flash are scared of bare bulb, for some reason. It's not, oh, harsh shadows, that's scary, whatever. Let's just throw a big softbox on it and that solves all the issues. But that's not the case. So I think having an understanding of what they do is important. It is.
It does make me scratch my head, though, that like people are afraid to use hard light, but then they'll go take someone into the sunset and go take a picture of them at golden hour. It's like, find a harsher source of light than the freaking sun, man.
Yeah.
As you said, as you put so well, that you are as technical as you are abstract, I'd like to know, as a professional, and first of all, I'd like to say that on your website, you explain your process and your mentorships and how you go over concept building and mood board creation. Now, concept building can be a very abstract, in your head, above the shoulders sort of activity. How do you make that a repeatable thing when a lot of people, they usually wait for inspiration or motivation, or it's, it's a very emotional, like almost fleeting thing for a lot of people? How do you make that repeatable, and what's your process there?
Awesome. That's a great question. So all of my clients now are typically like C-suite, business owners, entrepreneurs, that are doing a very specialized thing. So when it comes to creating a concept or an idea, or, putting like looks together, I really get to like dive into that individual person and their individual like service, basically. So it's like, what do they do? How do they do it? Who are they and who do they serve? And I can like use those data points basically to start my creative process. So it's not like a plug and play or wait for inspiration kind of thing. It's like, these are my creative tools, and I start from there and kind of, start unpacking, and then decide how those pieces that I unpack get to start getting put together again.
Cool. It sounds like the skill that's come about is, what questions to ask these clients. You know how to get the information out of them that would give you the easiest time formulating a plan to move forward.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant. Mm-hmm. And so, you go through the shoot, you've got everything put together, and again, in line with that balance between creativity and technicality, when you're culling your photos, that's always an interesting conversation we can have with ourselves as we're going through the many photos we've taken. What stands out for you? And I'll give an example is Kevin and I have talked about this. And when Kevin culls his photos, he's looking for, more often than not, like immaculate technical things. And oftentimes if there's an exception, he'll make it. Whereas for me, I cull, and normally I'll just go through photos and I'll see a photo and it'll just hit me. I'll just know. I'll just be like, oh, that's a photo. I won't bother to explain why. I'll just let that be the photo. What is your process?
A great question. And just real quick, I love that those two processes speak directly to your technical and abstract styles. And once again, I'm kind of a blend of the two. Culling is probably one of my least favorite things to do in my entire process. And it just feels tedious to me after all the planning and the technical stuff that goes into creating the images. And a lot of times, once it gets to that point, during the shoot, I know when we get the shot. Like I know once we've made the magic and the magic has happened, and then we're just kind of shooting. So when I'm culling, very similar to you, the shot I'll feel it. I'll feel it when I see it. And then everything else is kind of fill in after that. But when I feel that shot and I zero in on it, it's like, yes, it does have the technical aspects that I was trying to create in that moment, but it also has the soul and the energy and the expression and the that life that comes from the photos that you want the audience to feel.
It's almost like you're recognizing like the pure essence of who you are creatively in that photo. That's why it speaks to you. Right.
Who I am creatively and who my subject is, at their core.
That's awesome, man.
Thanks. Hey.
So one of the things Brandon touched up on with his last question is, understanding your clients. Speaking of your clients, and this is something that you talk about on your website, I think it's a really smart thing that photographers who are listening, who are trying to build their business, should pay attention to. You kind of set the stage. You say, hey, are you a six-figure company sort of thing? Like you're saying, like, I can't. You're kind of weeding out people who are. It's like, hey, I've got a $300 budget to do a branding photo session, and you're just like, nah. First of all, how did you get to that point? I understand it's years and years of experience. I'm not talking about the technical side of how good at pictures you take, because I think that once you hit a certain threshold as a photographer, you're good enough to do a lot of different things, even though you may not be the best photographer in the world. I know wedding photographers who take good pictures, but not something that blows my mind, but their clients are happy. They deliver what you talk about, the experience and stuff like that. So like, I mean, I can find, dozens of photographers who can take pictures better than this person, but they're running a killer business. Yeah. And I do think that once you get above a certain threshold, it's more about focusing on the business. So Absolutely. I guess to the original, I'll reset my question, which is, how did you establish your niche market? And I hate that word niche, but how did you establish a market of, hey, you basically have to be playing in this kind of financial area to hire me? How did you get there? Yeah.
Before I dive into that completely, I think it's important to say, like, piggyback on what you said. It's not about the photography, yeah, we can all produce great photography. So, I have a certain set of skills that I've developed over a couple of decades, plus. And, I feel like I've put in my time. Like I said earlier, I kind of developed my spot in the world as a wedding photographer. And, I am officially retired. I shot my last wedding this past December. That feels awesome. And, so to be in the space that I am now, I get to command what my rates are, and I stand beside the value that I provide my clients, and that's really the bottom line. Like I know I produce great work, and I know for a fact that my clients are going to increase their marketing ROI because I produce high impact images that are going to direct eyeballs from where they are to what my clients are putting out. So if my client is a 6-figure plus business owner, I know they're not going to need time for me to educate them why I'm charging what I'm charging. They will already know, and they'll be prepared and excited for what we can do together for their business.
And that's something that we've talked about on this pod in the past. We did a business episode, and it's totally true. People who are willing to pay you whatever 20 or 30 grand to do a session, if they're already willing to pay you that much, they already know that you're worth that much. Just the fact that they're having that conversation with you, you're worth that much. And I often find they're easier clients to work with because
so much easier.
Yeah. Like it's the person at the bottom of the barrel who's just like, oh, hey, can you do this for $100? They're the one who's going to have all these demands because you're going to put up, if somebody, first of all, I wouldn't take the job, but if somebody's going to pay me $100, I'm only going to put in $100 of effort. Right. So,
yeah.
So, and that's the problem I see with a lot of upcoming photographers is that and I get it when you start off, you say yes to pretty much anything because you're just wanting to learn how to do it. But when they establish a market for themselves, it's like these portrait photographers that'll go do family sessions and like, oh, I'm going to do mini sessions, $50 get you 30 minutes, that kind of stuff. It's like you are establishing a market for yourself and you're creating bird dogs that will go out and go, oh, I recommend using such and such photographer. They only did it for $50. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? The person who calls you up and is like, knocking on your door, they're expecting you to do it for $50, not expecting you to do it for $2,000.
That's right.
That's a tough sell if you establish that bottom market. It's really hard to get up from there. And to your point of, hey, at a certain point, it's really not about the photography. That's the mentality that I try to get across to people all the time on this pod is that, look, if you're good enough to shoot a wedding, you're good enough to shoot a wedding, and that's fine. But now you need to start focusing on all the other parts of being a wedding photographer, which leads me to my next question, because I shoot at most 2 or 3 weddings a year. I do it. I shoot weddings to stay sharp because I personally think that a wedding photographer is one of the most rounded and complete types of photographers you can find. But I also think that the amount of stress that comes with a wedding is not worth it because there's still a part of me that wants to be an artist and all that. And so it's like, I can't do that if I'm shooting weddings all the time. If I become a full-time wedding photographer. So I basically do weddings through word of mouth. I don't advertise that I do weddings. I'll put them in my Instagram story and some model will be like, oh, I didn't know you did weddings. Will you do my wedding? That's typically how it happens. I'll end up shooting a model's wedding or something like that. But my question is shooting weddings, and I know you're not doing it anymore, but what skills, and this could be a very long answer, what skills has shooting weddings taught you as a photographer, and how's that translated over into what you're doing now?
Everything. I mean, this might be a long answer.
It's all good. Take your time.
I'm like I said before, I'm happy to be retired from weddings, but weddings taught me everything that I know as a photographer. What I loved about weddings was it was a shotgun mashup of literally every genre of photography that I love. Editorial and portrait and details and products and the lavish details and being able to challenge yourself technically, but do it super fast. And, you only have one chance all of the things. It really taught me to be laser focused and sharp, not just technically, but creatively, on the photography side. On the business side, it helped me understand what my value add is to my client, and how important their experience is, not just during the shoot or the wedding day, the entire experience. And I mean, experience wise, I mean, from the very first time that they encounter me online or on Instagram or wherever it might be, even if it's word of mouth from a previous client, like every single touch point, it's you're delivering an experience, and you have at every point, like you can create what that experience is based on how you treat every client during every touch point.
Yeah. And also from a technical standpoint, you think about weddings, you're taking some shots in natural lighting. You have to learn how to use off-camera flash, speed lights. You end up learning how to shoot in, Catholic churches where they don't allow flashes, and not even though the aesthetics in there may be beautiful, they might have stained glass windows. It may not light up your subjects well. You may, you take shots. You do weddings in small little chapels. You end up in vineyards. Like there's all these different experiences that teach you how to be an environmental photographer. And then, you have to also learn how to pose non-models. There's so many skills a wedding photographer can teach you. I personally just shoot them when I need a new lens. I'm like, yeah, I'll take on a wedding. Like, this new 85 1.2 came out. Yeah, I'll take a wedding. but no, I really do think that even though I think that wedding photographers tends to be punching bags a lot of the times, like people just like dismiss them. But I really do think that it's probably the hardest genre to get into and do well, because you can shoot everything's tiered. You can shoot weddings at a lower level, and you have lower level clients. I don't mean like they're like lower level human beings, just lower level budgets, right? They have lower level budgets, and so their expectations can't be the moon. But but even at those lower levels, if you are going to get called again to do weddings, you have to be good at it, even at the lower levels, because that bride is going to look at those images at least once a week for the next however many years. And, it'll go down to maybe once a month. But if you suck, they're going to remember you forever.
Forever.
You ruined my day. People get sued. Over weddings. You got to have a good contract. That's another thing, is wedding photography teaches you about contracts. Because,
yes.
Gosh, and that's I think that's where we're going to roll into next, is commercial photography. Because you do have commercial photography.
Yeah. So
a lot of photographers, I preach this on this episode, is that, a lot of photographers, they'll ask me like, hey, what's your rate? And I'd be like, I'll give you a number and it'll be completely meaningless. It has absolutely, because my rate depends on how much I need to save for retirement, how much I need to pay off gear. If I tend to pay cash for everything, but if I need to pay off gear, do I want to do a 529 for my child? Like, how much money do I need for this or that? Or do I want to go on vacation? Like, that's how I base my rates. I don't base my rates off of, I go see what somebody else is charging, and then I go charge what they charge. Because you're charging their rate. If they even did what I just said, base their rates off of real world things, you're still basing your rate off of their real world things, not your real world things. You're not, what's your target for retirement? What's your target for this or that? And so I guess we'll go into the commercial conversation, but I want to hear your take on how to establish a rate, whether it's a day rate or an hourly rate, because that can change based off of this could be a really long discussion, but we're here for it. This is what we like to do on this pod.
Awesome. That is one of my favorite things to talk about with growing photographers, or even high level pro photographers. How do we charge? Like, how do we create our rate? And that one of the biggest mistakes photographers make is they'll, go to someone else's website and research and try to figure out what someone else is charging, and then model what someone else is doing. And you already kind of alluded to this, modeling yourself after what someone else is doing, and you don't know the A to Z. You're setting yourself up to fail straight off the bat. And what I see a lot of photographers doing is, underpricing themselves and charging too little, and hurting themselves and the industry all at once, because they don't fully understand what the cost of doing business is, to start off. So that's what I like to start with. Like, what are my expenses? What is my lifestyle? How do I want to live? How do I support my family? What do I want to be doing 5 years from now? Do I want to be doing exactly this, or am I going to be building and growing to do something different? Am I going to be investing? Am I going to be, what are my plans? All that stuff gets considered when talking about rates.
Well, on your website, I think it said something to the effect of you only take 3 jobs a month, sort of thing, right? That plays into a formula. How much do I want to charge? Well, if I'm only taking 3 jobs a month, I have to charge this. I have to charge this much for these 3 jobs. Like, you have established. Yeah, there's a minimum. And I don't think people think about that. And I think the point that you made is it hurts the industry. That's the one that I definitely want to drive home, is if you devalue yourself and there's a collective of people who devalue themselves. That is what the industry is now in your town. There's a bunch of people who devalue themselves and charge $50 for mini sessions for families when they could be charging $2,000 for not mini sessions, but a full family session that they take their time and all that. And those families will pay if you know how to approach it right.
Yeah.
But if you create a market to where families, well, all the photographers are charging $50 for mini sessions, you just screwed everybody.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, I want you to continue about like something like a day rate. Discuss why you would charge a day rate for a commercial job. Because a lot of people, they'll be like, clients will even need to be educated on this. Like, what do you charge per hour? I don't have an hourly rate because I only do jobs that take a half a day or a full day. Now there's exceptions when I'm shooting for agencies. Like I did this morning, I did a 2-hour job for an agency, but talk about why it's important to have half day rates and full day rates. Cause I'm sure you have one if you're doing a commercial job.
Yeah. Half day, full day rates. That's just a simple way to make sure that my expenses are met, that my time is respected and paid for. And it also is kind of like a filter at the door. Like I don't want to be working with clients that, there is a fair amount of education involved still, no matter what, but I don't want to be working with the client that says, how much do you charge per hour? And we kind of figure it out. And then they expect it to be, okay, that's all I'm going to have to pay. Like the day rate for my service is for my time as a photographer, as a creative. There's still, other fees on top of that. Images are separate. Usage is separate. Production is separate. Everything else is separate. So my day rate is for me as a creative photographer. And that gets to be itemized, and my clients understand that.
Yes. And so if you're listening to this, day rate, half day rate, that is to pay to get my ass off the couch to go shoot for half a day or go shoot for a full day. He talked about production. Oh, we need to cater. We need to have food here for talent and stuff like that, or we need to hire models, or we need to research the locations we might want to shoot at. That has nothing to do with your day rate. That has everything to do with your production costs and your production rate. And then he brought up a very key word that starts with the letter U, and it's called usage. And that's important because oftentimes I find photographers, they're just like, I'm going to sell this job for $1,000. Well, what did you sell them for $1,000? I shot for a full day. I edited 2,500 photos, and we did not establish any sort of licensing, or I just gave them the photos and they could do whatever they want with them. Like, so they can put them on a billboard.
Right.
As you're driving down I-35, you can see a big billboard for a lawyer's office, and you charge them $1,000 for that job. And so people don't want to educate, photographers don't want to educate themselves on those line items, those very important line items for commercial jobs. Like, I'm assuming you do the same thing. When I have a corporation, a company reach out to me, the very first question I ask them is, what are we doing with these images? Oh, we're going to be using them on our website. Okay, well, it's a digital job. Oh, we're going to be using them in print marketing materials. Oh, we're going to be putting them on a billboard. That's a much more expensive job because I have to put a value on how much money I think they're going to make off of this visual aesthetic that I've established for them, right?
Absolutely. And it's a much different conversation. Each one of those questions is like, it's so important to even know how to ask, because the next question is like, what's your ad spend going to be? How much are you putting into this campaign? So I know how much value this is providing. Like these are important questions. If you're going to have a sustainable business, this business that is hiring you, they have a sustainable business. Why is that? Because they know where their money's going. They know how it's going to be spent. They know what it's going to take to bring in the rest of the business. You have to do the same as a photographer. So if you're going to be hired by a commercial entity that's going to be using your images to make their millions, you obviously deserve a healthy cut of that. So you must understand what they're going to be doing with the images at every point and for how long, and make sure that you maintain rights to that. One thing that It's really hard because so much of the photographic community doesn't understand. And with the influencer, whole movement, commercial space has kind of gotten a little bit wonky. So photographers have to understand, we create the art, we maintain rights to the art, and we get to dictate like the time frames that they get to be used, and we can charge for that.
Hi, I'm Jordan Groby, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
You bring up a great point. We maintain the rights to the art. In the last 10 years, I'm just going to throw out an arbitrary number. In the last 10 years, how many jobs have you done that didn't have a contract or a release?
How many jobs? None.
Correct.
No.
That is the one and only answer. So I had a really good friend of mine, and this happens all the time. He's like, man, I shot this kid's party or whatever, and I gave a couple of the shots that I took to the magician, and the mom freaked out that I gave my shots to the magician. And I was like, well, did you have a release? He's like, no. I was like, so basically where we're at here is you own the images, but the people you took the shots of have not given you any permission to use their likeness at all. And so the mom technically could tell the magician, do not use these shots. And there are also minors involved probably because you said it was a kid's party. So it's like just not even thinking like, holy shit, maybe I should think about that when I'm doing a job. And I even tell people, I harp on this, even if you're doing a TFP thing for your portfolio, you still get a release because you can't use that model's likeness without their signature.
Yep.
And so I wanted to drive that point home. Every time you take pictures of people for your portfolio, even if there's no money exchanging hands, you have to have some sort of piece of paperwork where all parties are stating their intentions of what they want to do with the photos, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And even a little further than that, even if there's no monetary exchange, just for the health of the relationship and for business moving forward, everyone should understand what's happening, what the exchange is, what terms are there, usage included. I see this so often in Facebook groups and posts and things, models upset and the conversation of who pays who and all of that. And often after the fact, like a model wants to use an image in her, a publication or something where she's going to be monetizing it. And then it's like this big thing, but there was never any anything signed or exchanged. So it's like, it's just a big mess that can be avoided by a simple contract and signature.
It certainly doesn't hurt to have a legal document where all parties are stating what they want to do with this project, right? So yeah, that's something that even if you're taking families out in the fields and shooting them for little mini sessions, every single time you need a release, at least a release. And then when you get into the more corporate stuff, you need contracts, maybe if there's licensing. That's something I want you to talk about with commercial. And I've talked about it a little bit on this, but you explain the difference between like licensing and copyright buyouts and how often you run into that with commercial jobs.
I think buyouts are happening more and more often, or at least the conversation for them is happening more and more often because I think people want to be as hands off as they can be, keeping track of where things are and how long it's been, and they just kind of want to be able to have the images and use them for as long as they want to without worrying about getting in trouble because they've gone over or whatever. So buyouts, I love the buyout conversation because I know right off the bat that it's going to be, an expensive exchange. If I'm gonna like basically give away all future opportunity for any incoming revenue by this corporation buying the rights to these images, it's going to come at a hefty, price tag for sure.
As it should.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Coca-Cola is making some money off you.
Absolutely.
You need to be making some money off Coca-Cola.
That's right.
So, it is funny though how often I run into corporations that don't understand how this works, and it's like, have you never done a marketing campaign with a photographer before?
It's shocking.
Because actually, it's funny. I ran into this one company that's like, we've been so disappointed with all of our photographers in the past. And as soon as I started getting into a conversation with them about licensing and copyright buyout and stuff, they're like, we don't understand what you're talking about. And I was like, well, it sounds like you weren't working with commercial photographers is what it sounds like. Maybe that's why you weren't happy with them. However, once I started shooting out figures at them, they're like, whoa. Of course, the problem is this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is driving down the market. Inexperienced people who might take good pictures, a corporation goes, oh, well, we like those. How much are you going to charge? And then they even though they take good pictures, they're not commercial photographers by trade. And so then they hire them to do this campaign and they just completely botch it because they don't understand everything that goes into shooting a campaign, and they keep getting upset with it. And then they finally run across somebody who knows what they're talking about. But because they were charged so little, now all of a sudden there's sticker shock when you're trying to charge them well into 5 figures for a job. And they're just like, whoa, the last guy charged us like $2,000. It's like, yeah, and that's why you're disappointed. Like, pay the money, be happy.
Right. Because once again, it's more than great photos. There's so much more that goes in, especially in the commercial space, that goes into shooting a job than taking great photos. It's just, I mean, it's a mountain compared to just shooting photos, the rest that goes into it. So if someone gets hired because they take great photos, but they've never done it before or don't have the experience of what it takes, they're not going to get it right.
Yeah, and I see this a lot with wedding photographers. I don't really use Facebook anymore, but I'm in Facebook groups that are photography related. And I like to mentor people when I can, and I see this like at least once a week. Someone's like, I want to shoot my first wedding. What lenses should I use? What camera body should I use? And all this, I'm just like, whoa. If you're good enough to shoot weddings, I could throw you in a wedding and within 2 or 3 seconds, you're going to figure all that out because you're that good. You need to learn all the other parts of being a wedding photographer, sitting down and talking about a shot list, talking about who's going to be mad at each other if you ask them to take a picture with one another when you're doing family pictures. Right. Maybe the dad is cheating on the mom and with the secretary, and you don't want to do the mom and the father and the daughter, mother, the bride to get in the same shot because there's some drama going on. Learn the other parts of your job. It's not just about taking pictures. If that's all you want to do, be a hobbyist, not a business owner.
Yep. Goes into the experience, speaks into the experience that you provide. All of those points that you just mentioned are so much more important than what lenses you're going to have in your bag that day, for sure. You can get the job done with a 50 millimeter and that's it, but if you don't know, what details are important to the couple or what moments they're looking forward to getting captured or what relationships are within the family dynamic, then, you could still fail regardless of what equipment you have in your bag.
You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
Well, I just wanted to ask one thing. Obviously, there's a lot of structure when it comes to being a professional photographer, especially doing more commercial level stuff. However, as photographers, we do have that creative bone. And I know you do because we've talked about it extensively already. Where do you get your inspiration from? What's the driving factor? For me and Kevin, we draw from a lot of movies, that sort of thing. Where's the mojo with Dauss?
The Dauss effect comes from. That's a great question, man. I don't really have like this will show you the abstract piece of me. I don't have like a go-to thing or a formula or anything like that. I got my creative background. I was a fine artist, so I'm painting and sculpting and just kind of like creating based on my mood or just what was around. And I love abstract and just beginning without having a final like image in mind or a final like thing that I'm working toward in mind and just like, just creating, whatever that looks like. If it's a job, that's a little bit different, but my creativity it just kind of comes through me, and I don't really have a go-to. It's more like setting my intention and my mind in a place where I can just close my eyes and just start and be okay with whatever the process is to get to the final result, whatever that happens to be.
Cool. So, okay, so you've got your intentions set. You have an idea of a rough end goal. Maybe if you squint, you can see it, right? How do you start off the session? Do you need like a warm up phase? Do you kind of just like know that, okay, these first 10 minutes are going to kind of be throwaway where I learn how you shoot? Or do you kind of like dive right in with a structure? You're like, okay, we need to get this, we need to get that, and then it'll come together as we go forward. Like, what's that kind of process for you?
Yeah. So if it's a client thing, I have at least, like, I'm not going to show up to a shoot or have a thing happening where, extensive planning hasn't already happened. So we can allow the creative process to happen, at the shoot, but we've kind of already structured what that looks like. So it can be loose. And there is that time frame where, they've got to get comfortable with me and I've got to get comfortable with them and how they work and all the things. So we kind of allow for that. And so a trick that I have, I'll be testing light or testing whatever. And in that short phase of me setting up and dialing in lights, I will be getting some gold like content because they aren't live. They aren't like expecting me to be, catching, taking photos.
They're not like activated yet.
Right. So a lot of times, and we'll just, I'll be talking to them and getting to know them and hearing their story a little bit more, follow up from previous meetings or whatever. And I'll be getting some really awesome, authentic expressions during that phase too. So, I think every stage of the process for me is set up to make my client comfortable and to the end goal is to capture authentic expression. And however I can do that, whether it's as soon as we get to the studio or to the location, all the way to the end, that's my goal. So whatever the creative concept is around that, which can develop and flow and be fluid through the process, my intention is to create a safe, comfortable platform for them to be able to express. So if I can put them at ease, and even if it's a little sideways because I'm telling them I'm testing my lights, to make them feel comfortable and off guard, that's a way for me to get awesome shots straight off the bat.
And that fluidity is so important, like it totally depends on the client. Like sometimes you go into the thing and you've got a structured mood board, you've got it on screen and you're just like, okay, we're going to go for that pose. Like we're going to nail that. We're going to start testing that pose out. And some clients, like, they need that,
Some do, yeah.
And then other clients, you might have that mood board present, you might have that posture present that you want to run through, and it's kind of like a backup. And really with this client, you don't need those posturings. You kind of just need to focus on facilitating that environment where they can thrive, because once they're thriving, they've got it in back of pocket. Yes. They can nail it.
Yep. Yeah. Perfect. That's it. That speaks into like really understanding who you're working with and what tool belt to put on once you get to the shoot, you don't want to, like, I feel like it's a disservice to have just a structured blueprint for every shoot, every time, all the things, because every human being is different. Every subject is going to be different. They're going to require different processes. So, understanding that going into it, I think you can save a lot of time and a lot of stress by like marrying yourself to a process or an outcome that is just organically going to be different every time because your subject's different every time. So
sometimes spontaneity is a good thing too.
Absolutely.
I mean, sticking to a structure is a skill, but being able to improvise is also a skill.
Yes.
And the goal is to create like a good end product. It doesn't matter how you get there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes and we talked about this several times on the show, sometimes I'll have like a very awesome structure put together, and the second I start shooting, I'm like, this is not happening. Mm-hmm. It's time to just fly by the seat of your pants and get this done. And you end up where you need to end up. But it's always good to have a plan, because if you just show up with no plan, That's where it's like, because if spontaneity doesn't work, it's over. It's like, at least I can stick to something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's about having a plan, but having a backup and being okay with all of that being fluid.
Do you have a way of weeding that out with the models? When it comes down to like everything's planned out, model walks in, we do our pleasantries, we exchange our hello, how you doing? Oh yeah, the weather's great. And then we get past that part. Usually I'll be like, when you're modeling, are you in your body? Like, do you roll with an emotion and kind of like flow that around and kind of work with that? Or are you more so you have a set of poses in line? Like once you're on, you go through your routine and, a little bit more rigid. And usually it's one or the other. And then sometimes, a model just won't know. Is there something that you ask or something that you kind of use to weed out your approach to save you time and energy figuring it out?
Yeah, I like to do a lot of like pre-work as far as that's concerned. So these are questions that I would ask before the actual shoot day. I ask the question, and I even I'll look at a portfolio. If we're talking about a model, I'll look at her portfolio or his portfolio, try and find some video to see how they move and how they work. So I, have some ground to stand on. I don't like to just start cold at the studio and not have some sort of information about how this person works and how I'm going to be able to get them to meet this vision that we've got. So, but yeah, I will ask, usually before the shoot, like I said, do you need to assume a character for the day, or do you, is it good enough for us to put a solid mood board together, and create, a mood for you to adapt? Or can I show you this series of movements and can you emulate that? I'll find out how they work, but typically before the shoot, so we can kind of get there and press go and see how it works. And if we need to pivot, then we'll pivot.
Dude, I bet your itinerary, your pre-shoot itinerary is just like chocked full. Like, do you use Millinode, or do you how do you put all this together? Because it sounds like you've got a solid built out strategy before even going into the shoot. Like, you don't start cold in almost any aspect. No, yeah.
I mean, the details are important. They're important for planning. They're important for the final outcome. So, I use a solid CRM and I take notes, and that's pretty much it.
Right on.
Yeah. Cool. And I feel like, and this is one thing that I pulled from my wedding photography experience, throughout the process, the more that we can stay on the same page, in terms of like what we're doing and how we're going to reach our final outcome, the better. And like I said before, everyone's different, so everyone's going to kind of require a slightly different formula. But at the end of the day, if at each call or each touch point, we can walk away with a clear understanding of where we are and what that means in terms of what we're trying to get to, we're more likely to reach our final destination and both be elated with what we come up with every step of the way.
This is Jason Berkman, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
We're here with Dauss today, Dauss Miller, and we are going to finish this episode talking about the subject of marketing. Okay? Because as we discussed earlier in this episode, photographers, they think they just have to take good pictures. Now they've learned that, they have to figure out how to maybe price themselves. And there's all these things that they need to learn to do. But marketing is one that I think photographers as a whole kind of suck at. And I remember I hear these people that will say like, I just use Instagram. It's like, okay, so let me get this straight. You're putting all your marketing eggs in the basket of Meta, which is a company whose sole purpose is to keep people on their platform for as long as possible for advertising. That's your marketing strategy to drive your photography company. Am I getting this straight? Okay. So, first of all, what are your thoughts on putting all your eggs in the Instagram basket? I already know the answer. And what should they be doing instead?
Oh, the Instagram basket. Well, yeah, if you don't pay to be visible, you're not, no matter how big your audience is, your audience isn't going to be seeing what you're putting out there. It's just the nature of how it's set up. Those platforms aren't in place to just be happy connectors like they show to be. They won't be making money unless people are paying to be visible. So it's kind of like a hope marketing strategy, like I hope the right person encounters me on my Instagram or, happens to be shown my content on Instagram. Otherwise it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a waste, but it's kind of a waste.
Well, even with just a little bit of research, these people could realize how much Instagram is screwing them over because they throttle. It's like, okay, let's say you have 10,000 followers, okay? And you put out a really awesome picture that you're proud of. You can go into the view stats and it'll say, yeah, you have 10,000 followers, but we've only showed this to 350 people. Yeah, and maybe you have 60 likes. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay. So I'm guessing that if you have 10,000 followers and they've shown it to 350 people, my guess is that, okay, let's just say 3,000 of your followers are bots or whatever. You still have 7,000 followers. And I guarantee you of those 7,000 followers, more than 350 of those followers are on Instagram that day. But for whatever reason, Meta and Instagram decided not to show your picture to that person who has made the decision to follow you. And so that's why I think it is absolutely crazy that people just rely on Instagram to make their photography business grow. And then they sit there and they bitch about how little money they have or how little money they're making. And it's like, yeah, because you're depending on people whose sole purpose isn't even to promote your photography business, to promote your photography business. They want people to stay on their app. That's all they want people to do. And if they show your picture, that may not help people stay on the app. It's like that is an insane marketing strategy.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, what are some things that people can do? You said spend money, and what should they be spending money on?
Let's back up. I think there's some effective strategies that don't have to, be this huge, expensive strategy. So a lot of if you have traffic to your website, if you have if you've done the work in SEO and and you're ranking and all the things, and you have a decent amount of web traffic, you can cater to your audience by showing up as an expert and providing value, doing things like lead magnets to develop an email list or some sort of I hesitate to say funnel, but some sort of thing that directs them through an experience on the lead portion. So you can capture their information and you can continue to market to them for free. For me, in the branding space, I can get a healthy flood of leads by creating a lead magnet by, piquing their interest on how am I going to have a successful image campaign and give them some tips on what to do or how to improve their marketing dollar. Provide that lead magnet. They leave me their name and their email, and then they plug into my automated, drip campaign that's going to continue to feed them value for, now it's probably stretches out to a few months as I just keep adding content to it. And then when they're ready to inquire further, there's calls to action in there that they can, click on it and they can reach out and begin the process. So that doesn't cost anything. And I feel like the more for a photographer these days, the more places you can show up for your ideal audience, the better. So that's a way that, might take a little time. It's not going to give you immediate results, but playing back into that, every touch point, providing value and providing an experience that has people remembering you as an expert and remembering you helping them out and, solving their problems, smoothing their friction points before they've ever even contacted you to hire you. So those people that have gone through channels like that click the call to action to schedule a call, by the time we talk, they are already fairly comfortable. They're already assuming that, I have a price range on my site typically. So they're not going to be the shoppers. They're not going to be offended to hear, a 5-figure cost for what we're going to be putting together, because they already kind of understand, and they know the value they're going to receive. Then the paid ads, Facebook, Instagram, depending on what genre of photography you do, some super solid strategies based on ads, as long as you have a follow-up in place. I think a lot of people have this expectation that they're going to boost a post or, do a quick Facebook ad and it's going to, their door is going to get knocked down by people. I think there's still a nurturing that needs to happen. And it's got to be organized so that, you're split testing and those clicks and people are going to be served with other value to get them to convert.
Facebook is a necessary evil. I personally don't like Facebook, but the generation who has the most disposable income right now, they favor Facebook. Mm-hmm. The young kids, they use TikTok and all that, but I'm sorry, young kids don't have a lot of money. People in their 50s and their 60s they have most of the money. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, targeting ads on Facebook isn't a bad idea, Speaking of social media, are you on the Threads game yet?
As soon as I got the notification, I was like, ooh, it's a new platform. It's probably going to be, for a short bit, low traffic, high visibility. Like, let me see what kind of traction I can get from it. So yeah,
I had a conversation with Peter McKinnon this morning. So cool. I guess,
yeah,
I guess it's working.
Yeah.
And Brad Stuver, the goalie of Austin FC, follows me. So
cool.
Yeah. So it's like, it is funny though, watching people on new social media platforms, because we saw this on Clubhouse. People would get in there and they'd be like, okay, so, you'd have to sort through the BS because some people were experts and some people pretended to be experts. But you always get these people, like, I saw this happen, like when people left, when people got bored at Clubhouse, there's this space of photographers who went over to Twitter, the NFT people. We won't get into that. We already did that in the last episode. But we called it non-fungible bullshit. That was the name of the last episode. But anyway, these people that get in, they're like, oh, it's a brand new social. I need to establish myself as an expert. So they're like, they'll ask a question and they try to get people to like engage and get, stuff going. And it's just so cute watching them all. It's like, I know what you're doing. Like, you're trying to pretend, you're trying to get in on this thing before everyone else. And, I started off like, I think my second post, I said, where are my film photographers at? And I was like, wait, you're being one of them. And so I was like, nope, don't do that. That's not why you do this. So I only did it on one post. And from that point on, I was like, I'm just going to post my work. And, I'll engage in conversations. Hopefully this place won't turn into a dump like Twitter. Cause Twitter is just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
but,
a mess. Yeah,
it's terrible. I just, I used to use Twitter as like a news ticker because because you turn on cable news and it's just like sensationalism, the world's going to end. I'm just like, I just want to see what happened. Like, where's that version of getting information? Like, just tell me what happened and then I can make my own informed decision. Mm-hmm. But anyway, hopefully Threads doesn't turn into that, but I going off on a little tangent there. I guess I need to follow you on Threads then. So
yeah, I'm still trying to decide what did it like?
I think it's trying. I think it's trying to decide what it is.
Yeah.
Because for me, that was one of the cool things about the early days of Clubhouse is because everybody was on lockdown, including famous photographers, mm-hmm. and so you'd end up in rooms with like people like some celebrity photographers, people like Tyler Shields and stuff like that. And you're just like, holy crap, I'm mm-hmm. talking to people like I would never normally get to talk to. Yeah. And you could just like pick their brain because they're literally on their couch for the next 2-3 months.
Yep.
And so that actually did some cool things for my career and getting my foot in the door with certain people. And so, maybe Threads will be the same thing, but who knows, man? Who knows? But thank you for coming out today. I want to everybody put your hands together for Dauss.
Thank you so much.
We'd love to have you on again sometime in the future. I had a million topics I didn't get to talk to you about, but that does it for today's episode. If you're listening, you can follow us at f11pod.com. You can use the handle F11pod on Twitter, which we never use, and Instagram, which we sometimes use. Maybe we'll do threads. We'll do a F11pod thread. I don't know what we do with it because I just actually put the stuff on my Kevin Deal threads, but whatever. All of you who are listening, who stuck around, we thank you. I hope you learned something. I thought Dauss was an awesome guest to have. And until next time, kids, chase light, not algorithms.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
For more information about this podcast, go to www.f11pod.com.